The clock had just struck midnight in the Capitol when the Speaker of Parliament gavelled the vote into history. By a margin of 65 to 35, the nation's president was formally removed from office, a constitutional coup carried out not by soldiers but by legislators. Outside the assembly, thousands huddled under umbrellas in freezing rain, their mobile phone torches flickering like vigil candles. Inside, opposition deputies embraced while government loyalists sat motionless, refusing to applaud. The president, watching from a secure location, had already prepared a response. Within 90 minutes, a nationally televised address confirmed what many had feared. He would not go quietly. The removal order, he declared, was illegitimate, the vote a travesty bought by oligarchs. He remained the commander-in-chief. He was not leaving. For a leader who once campaigned on stability and constitutional order, the decision to defy the very parliament that elevated him marks a perilous rupture. Officials close to the presidency, speaking on condition of anonymity, describe a man transformed by the isolation of high office, surrounded by a shrinking circle of family members and loyalists who feed a narrative of persecution. They say he genuinely believes foreign intelligence services orchestrated the 65 votes against him, a claim intelligence analysts dismiss as unfounded. Yet belief in politics often matters more than fact. The president has now barricaded himself inside the presidential compound, its gates chained shut, its flag still flying. Security forces remain divided. Some units have declared loyalty to the parliamentary speaker. Others await orders from the man inside the fence. The origins of this crisis lie not in a single scandal, but in a slow accretion of miscalculations, stretching back nearly 4 years. When the president took office, he enjoyed approval ratings above 60%, bolstered by promises to purge corruption and modernize the economy. His party controlled 112 seats in the 150-seat assembly. Foreign investors were circling. Ambassadors from Washington, London, and Brussels lined up for photo opportunities in his gilded reception hall. Yet power in this ancient land has always flowed through networks, not institutions. The president, an outsider by profession and temperament, failed to cultivate the regional governors, the security barons, the media magnates who translate electoral mandates into governing reality. Slowly, allies peeled away. Some were offended, others were bought. By the second year, the legislative agenda had stalled. Infrastructure projects remained unbuilt. Judicial reforms were hollowed out by amendments drafted in private villas overlooking the Black Sea. The president grew increasingly reclusive, conducting meetings via video link from a secure bunker, relying on a rotating cast of foreign consultants who understood the country's politics no better than tourists. Meanwhile, the economy, once the administration's sole remaining boast, began to falter. Currency reserves dwindled. Foreign direct investment fell by 40%. The International Monetary Fund suspended a bailout program citing a lack of transparency. Opposition newspapers, previously marginal, saw a circulation spike. Protest movements, initially confined to the capital's university district, spread to provincial cities. The president dismissed them as foreign-funded provocateurs. His approval rating slipped below 30%. The tipping point arrived, as it often does, via a leaked recording. In early autumn, an investigative journalism portal published audio captured in a seaside restaurant, allegedly featuring the president discussing vote buying in an upcoming by-election. The voice on the tape sounded fatigued, impatient, issuing instructions to an unidentified intermediary. The president's office called the recording a deep fake, but independent forensic analysts concluded it was authentic with high probability. Opposition parties, previously fractious and leaderless, united behind a single demand: resignation. When the president refused, they filed impeachment articles citing gross constitutional violation. Parliamentary procedure required a minimum of 50 votes to bring the motion to the floor. They gathered 68. Debate lasted 16 hours. Cameras captured deputies sleeping on couches in the cafeteria, aides ferrying coffee in cardboard cups. The parliamentary vote itself unfolded with the grim efficiency of a state execution. Tellers moved through the aisles collecting ballot slips in wooden urns, a tradition dating to the 19th century. Each vote was announced aloud, recorded, entered into the official ledger: 65 in favor, 35 against, 10 abstentions. The Speaker declared the motion carried and immediately transmitted the decision to the Constitutional Court for certification, a formality expected to take 72 hours. Yet the President did not wait. Within minutes, his social media accounts broadcast a statement written in capital letters: "I do not recognize, you do not dismiss a president like a servant. I was elected by the people. Only the people can send me home." Within hours, that message had been shared more than 2 million times, a digital declaration of war. Now, the Capitol exists in two realities. In the parliamentary wing, the Speaker has convened an emergency cabinet, appointing an acting interior minister from the opposition bloc. Official seals have been changed, new letterhead is being printed, civil servants ever attuned to the shifting winds have begun redirecting queries to the Speaker's office, yet at the presidential compound, lights burn through the night. Staff continue arriving for their shifts. The official presidential schedule published each morning lists meetings that do not occur, briefings that are not delivered. Security at the gates has been doubled. Snipers are visible on the roof. A detail officials claim is routine, but no one believes. Armored vehicles have been positioned along the perimeter. Inside, the president is said to be drafting a nationwide address, rewriting it obsessively, discarding draft after draft. The international community, so often the arbiter of contested transitions, has responded with characteristic caution. Washington issued a measured statement noting the vote and urging all parties to respect constitutional processes. Brussels echoed the sentiment, adding a reminder about European values and the rule of law. Moscow, characteristically, has remained silent, though analysts note that state media coverage has subtly shifted, describing the impeachment as an internal matter while highlighting the president's defiant statements. Beijing has declined comment. Behind the scenes, however, diplomatic cables are flying. Ambassadors have requested urgent meetings with both the Speaker and the president. Neither side has confirmed any such encounters. Sources within the foreign ministry suggest that several embassies are quietly advising their nationals to consider departure while commercial flights remain available. Constitutional scholars are divided on the legality of the president's defiance. The charter explicitly states that a president removed by Parliament must vacate office within 24 hours of certification by the Constitutional Court. Yet that certification has not occurred. The court's 9 justices are reportedly split, with at least 3 expressing procedural concerns about the vote's timing. The Chief Justice, an 83-year-old appointee of a previous administration, has not been seen publicly since the vote. Staff cite a respiratory infection. Legal experts suggest the ambiguity is itself a weapon. The longer the court deliberates, the more the crisis solidifies into a binary choice, 2 men claiming supreme authority. In such vacuums, the ultimate arbiters are rarely judges, they are generals. The military high command has maintained public silence, a posture that analysts interpret as deeply ominous. Historically, this nation's armed forces have intervened in politics 4 times in the past 60 years, each intervention bloodier than the last. The current Chief of Defense Staff, a 59-year-old general known for meticulous grooming and minimal public statements, has canceled all leave and confined troops to barracks. Military convoys have been observed moving toward the Capitol, officially described as routine logistical exercises. Opposition figures have privately appealed to senior officers to recognize parliamentary authority. Pro-presidential loyalists within the officer corps, concentrated in the Army's Special Forces Brigade, have signaled they will defend the constitutional commander-in-chief. No one knows which order the general would obey. It is likely he does not yet know himself. Foreign investors have already made their choice through action rather than words. The national currency has fallen 12% against the dollar since the parliamentary vote, its steepest decline since the 2008 financial crisis. The stock exchange halted trading twice in a single morning after automated sell orders overwhelmed human brokers. Credit default swaps, a measure of perceived sovereign risk, have spiked to levels associated with active armed conflict. Multinational corporations with regional headquarters in the capital have begun implementing evacuation protocols, chartering aircraft, distributing laminated cards with emergency contact numbers. One European energy company temporarily relocated 40 senior executives to Istanbul, pending clarification of who holds lawful authority to sign contracts, grant visas, or guarantee security. Business, like nature, abhors a vacuum. Regional implications are already crystallizing. Neighboring states, accustomed to this country serving as a buffer between competing spheres of influence, are recalibrating rapidly. The nation to the east has reinforced its border guards and announced unscheduled military exercises. The nation to the west and European Union member state convened an Emergency Security Council meeting expressing concern about potential refugee flows. A prominent geopolitical analyst based in Berlin described the situation as a stress test for the continent's crisis management architecture, noting that simultaneous pressures in multiple post-Soviet states have stretched diplomatic resources thin. Meanwhile, energy pipelines crossing the contested territory continue pumping gas and oil toward European markets, their control rooms staffed by engineers trying to ignore the television news playing in the corner. For ordinary citizens, the crisis is experienced not as high politics, but as disruption to daily rhythms. Banks have imposed withdrawal limits, ostensibly to preserve liquidity, more likely to prevent panic. Supermarket shelves, normally abundant with imported goods, show gaps where Italian pasta and German beer once stood. Mobile internet speeds have slowed noticeably, with technicians unable to access switching stations located in contested security zones. Parents keep children home from school, uncertain whether teachers will arrive or whether school buildings might become contested sites. In provincial towns, mayors wait for instructions from the capital that never come. At border crossings, customs officers stamp passports bearing the presidential seal, uncertain whether those documents will be recognized abroad. Democracy, it turns out, is not a switch but a membrane easily punctured. The president's inner circle, never large, has contracted to a handful of lifelong loyalists. They include his college roommate, now serving as chief of staff, a man whose receding hairline and permanent scowl have become familiar features of televised briefings. Also present is the Deputy Interior Minister, a former police general who oversaw counterterrorism operations and now coordinates the president's security detail. Both men face arrest warrants issued by the parliamentary speaker, though no serious attempt to enforce them has yet occurred. A former American political consultant, paid through a shell company registered in Cyprus, continues advising on communication strategy via encrypted messaging applications. His most recent recommendation, according to a source familiar with the discussions, was that the president should not be seen smiling. Defiance requires austerity of expression. Analysts who have studied similar crises across 4 continents identify recurring patterns. First, the defiant leader frames his struggle in moral rather than legal terms, appealing directly to a mythologized people against corrupted institutions. Second, external recognition becomes an obsession, the leader believing that if only Washington or Brussels would issue a supportive statement, the domestic tide would turn. Third, time is never the ally of the defiant. Each day without resolution hardens opposition and emboldens rivals. Fourth, security forces fragment not along ideological lines, but along personal networks, old school ties, regional loyalties, and private debts. A scholar at the Carnegie Endowment, who has advised governments on peaceful transitions, noted that every hour the president remains in the compound, the probability of violent resolution increases by measurable increments. The Speaker of Parliament, previously a marginal figure known for procedural expertise rather than political charisma, has emerged as the unexpected face of the opposition. His speeches, delivered in a flat provincial accent, emphasize restoration rather than revolution. He does not call the president a tyrant. He calls him a man who forgot the Constitution. He does not promise purges, he promises audits. This deliberate moderation is strategic, designed to reassure foreign capitals and nervous civil servants that the parliamentary transition represents continuity, not rupture. Yet the speaker's mild manner conceals steel. Associates describe him as possessing a photographic memory for slights and an unwavering conviction that institutions must be defended even against those who once led them. He has not spoken directly to the president since the vote. Their intermediaries communicate through handwritten notes. The Constitutional Court's deliberations have extended beyond their initial 72-hour window, deepening the legal fog. Sources close to the proceedings describe intense disagreements among the 9 justices, with several expressing concern that a rapid certification would be perceived as partisan. One justice reportedly asked colleagues to imagine how history would judge them if the president's defiance led to bloodshed and they had provided the spark. Another argued that failing to certify a lawful parliamentary vote would itself constitute a constitutional violation. The debate has grown personal with references to past rulings, academic publications, and even family connections. Meanwhile, the court's building, a Soviet-era structure of gray granite, has been surrounded by rival demonstrators kept apart by riot police. No justice has entered or exited through the main doors in 3 days. Television, still the dominant medium in this society, has become a battlefield. The public broadcaster, whose director was appointed by the president, continues to refer to him as the head of state, broadcasting archival footage of infrastructure inaugurations and state visits. Private channels owned by opposition-aligned businessmen have switched to covering the parliamentary speaker's press conferences live. One network attempted a compromise, splitting its screen between both leaders simultaneously, a visual representation of the national schizophrenia. Viewers accustomed to clear editorial lines are confused and increasingly angry. Ratings have soared. Advertising revenue has plummeted. Several prominent anchors have requested leave, citing stress. One veteran journalist assigned to cover the presidential compound told colleagues he felt like a war correspondent reporting from both sides of a front line that kept moving. Foreign correspondents have descended upon the Capitol, filing dispatches from hotel lobbies and rooftop bars converted into makeshift studios. They interview economists who cannot access central bank data, political scientists who have not spoken to the president in years, and protesters whose passion often exceeds their political literacy. Veteran journalists compare the atmosphere to other great Capitol sieges they have covered: Tehran in 1979, Manila in 1986, Kiev in 2014. There is the same sensation of history accelerating, of normal rules suspended, of ordinary people suddenly confronted with extraordinary choices. There is also the same dark humor, the gallows jokes shared by fixers and drivers who have seen too many regimes fall and too many victors become oppressors. A translator told a visiting BBC producer that this city has known 40 names in 1,000 years. The names change, the city endures. The president's family has become a focus of intense speculation. His wife, a former television presenter who largely withdrew from public life after her husband's inauguration, has not been seen since the vote. Their 2 adult children, educated in Switzerland and London, are reportedly abroad, though their exact locations are unknown. Opposition newspapers have published speculative articles about offshore accounts and luxury properties, allegations the president's office dismisses as defamation. In previous crises, first families have often served as pressure points, their vulnerability used to extract concessions from defiant leaders. Whether such leverage exists here remains unclear. What is clear is that the president, once a gregarious campaigner who posed for selfies with factory workers, now appears utterly alone, a sovereign of an ever-shrinking realm, bounded by security checkpoints and concrete barriers. The economic toll continues mounting. The finance ministry, its leadership divided between appointees of both claimants, has suspended publication of official statistics. The central bank governor, a respected technocrat, issued a brief statement urging calm before retreating into silence. International ratings agencies have placed the country's sovereign debt on review for downgrade, a technical procedure that carries real consequences for borrowing costs. Small businesses, already struggling with pandemic-era debt and inflation, face a new challenge: uncertainty. A restaurant owner in the Old Town, interviewed by Reuters, described how her lunchtime clientele had dwindled to a few regulars who sat in silence, watching the news on the wall-mounted television. She had survived war, pandemic, and earthquake, she said. She did not know if she would survive this. Religious leaders have attempted mediation, their moral authority one of the few remaining bridges between the two camps. The patriarch of the national church, a 94-year-old figure revered across political divides, privately conveyed a message to the president urging restraint and respect for constitutional order. The response, delivered verbally by an aide, was polite but non-committal. A senior cleric involved in the outreach described the president's mental state as focused but detached, as though he were analyzing a crisis affecting some distant country rather than his own impending removal. Another faith leader, representing the Muslim minority concentrated in the eastern provinces, issued a public appeal for dialogue, warning that communal tensions were rising and that inflammatory rhetoric could ignite long-dormant grievances. Both appeals were broadcast on religious channels. Neither altered the trajectory. Regional governors, traditionally kingmakers in national crises, have begun hedging their bets. The governor of the Northern Industrial Belt, a former presidential ally, issued a statement recognizing parliamentary authority while expressing personal sympathy for the president. The governor of the Southern Agricultural Region, facing local elections next year, has remained silent, waiting to see which way the wind settles. The governor of the Capital District, a presidential appointee, has effectively disappeared, his deputy managing routine administrative functions, while the governor himself reportedly consults with lawyers about potential asylum applications. These provincial calculations, granular and self-interested, will ultimately determine the crisis more than any parliamentary vote or constitutional ruling. Power in this ancient land flows upward from the provinces. It always has. Intelligence services, never transparent, have become black boxes. The Foreign Intelligence Service, whose director owes his position to presidential patronage, has issued no public statements. The Domestic Security Agency, historically more independent, is believed to be internally divided, with senior officers monitoring communications of both camps while preparing dossiers that could be used to demonstrate loyalty to whichever claimant prevails. A former deputy director, speaking privately, described the current situation as the nightmare scenario intelligence professionals train their entire careers to prevent, a leadership vacuum filled by rival security forces operating under conflicting legal authorities. He recalled that during the 1990s civil conflict, the intelligence headquarters changed hands 3 times in a single week. Each transition was accompanied by bonfires of documents and unexplained deaths. The International Diplomatic Corps continues shuttling between the two power centers, maintaining the fiction that normal protocols remain operative. The American ambassador, a career diplomat with experience in several post-Soviet hotspots, has met separately with both the president and the speaker, delivering identical messages about the importance of nonviolence and constitutional continuity. The European Union ambassador, whose organization provides substantial budgetary support, has warned that aid programs could be suspended if the crisis leads to human rights abuses. The Russian ambassador, a veteran of Moscow's hybrid warfare campaigns, has maintained a lower profile, though his analytical reporting to the foreign ministry is believed to be detailed and unsentimental. None of these diplomats expect to resolve the crisis. They are positioning themselves and their nations for the aftermath. Young people who form a plurality of the electorate have experienced this crisis through social media filters that bear little resemblance to traditional news coverage. TikTok videos set to upbeat music show protesters dancing in the rain outside Parliament. Instagram stories document the declining quality of instant coffee in the presidential compound as supply chains falter. Telegram channels, encrypted and anonymous, circulate rumors that established media cannot verify, including unconfirmed reports of troop movements and alleged defections. This digital fog of war complicates analysis and accelerates panic. A false report that the president had fled to Belarus caused a brief rally in the currency before being debunked. A rumor that the speaker had suffered a heart attack spread so rapidly that his office issued a denial within 20 minutes. Truth in this environment is simply the rumor that survives longest. The Constitutional Court finally issued its ruling on the 5th day, a document of extraordinary legal complexity that effectively declared both sides partially correct. The court confirmed that Parliament possessed the authority to impeach and that the vote had achieved the required supermajority. However, the court also ruled that the president retained the right to challenge the impeachment's factual basis before a newly constituted judicial panel, a process expected to require several weeks. Both claimants immediately declared victory. The president announced that the court had vindicated his position and that he would remain in office pending the panel's deliberations. The speaker declared that the court had affirmed Parliament's supremacy and that the president's continued occupancy of the compound constituted unlawful trespass. 2 truths equally certified, equally irreconcilable. The fog thickened. Security force fragmentation, long feared, now appears imminent. Army units stationed in the eastern provinces have declared loyalty to the parliamentary speaker, citing their oath to defend the Constitution rather than any individual. The Special Forces Brigade headquartered outside the capital has reaffirmed allegiance to the president as commander-in-chief. Between them lie conventional army formations whose commanders wait for orders from the general staff that do not arrive. Riot police, deployed to maintain a cordon between rival demonstrators, have begun rotating units more frequently Accordingly, concerned that prolonged exposure to hostile crowds might erode discipline, police officers assigned to protect government buildings have started removing identifying insignia from their uniforms. In such moments, the distinction between protection and occupation blurs. So does the distinction between policeman and combatant. The president delivered his first public address since the impeachment on the evening of the sixth day, standing before a bank of national flags in a wood-paneled room familiar to every citizen. He appeared older than photographs suggested, his hair thinner, his voice rougher. He spoke without notes, occasionally glancing at index cards held in trembling hands. He did not mention the parliamentary speaker by name. He did not acknowledge the Constitutional Court's ruling. Instead, he addressed the ancestors who had built this nation, the mothers who had sacrificed for its freedom, the soldiers who had died defending its borders. He invoked God, history, and the blood that flows in every citizen's veins. He said he would never surrender. He said he would never abandon his post. He said that if they wanted him to leave, they would have to carry him out. He did not specify who they were. He did not need to. Across the city, in a modest parliamentary office decorated with framed maps and faded photographs of previous speakers, the man who would be president watched the address on a wall-mounted television. He did not interrupt. He did not gesture. When the address concluded, he thanked the aides who had gathered in his office and asked them to leave him alone for a few minutes. A parliamentary photographer packing equipment in the corridor later described hearing what sounded like a single sob, quickly stifled. Whether the sound signified grief, exhaustion, or the immense weight of responsibility settling upon unexpected shoulders, no one could say. The speaker emerged 10 minutes later, his expression unchanged, and proceeded to a previously scheduled meeting with diplomatic representatives. The agenda included humanitarian access, economic stabilization, and contingency planning for all eventualities. He did not mention the president's address. He did not need to. The Capitol braces for what comes next. Armored vehicles have been repositioned at key intersections, their crews visible through open hatches, drinking coffee from thermoses, checking mobile phones. Checkpoints have multiplied, their personnel alternating between exaggerated courtesy and sudden inexplicable hostility. Commercial flights continue operating, though insurance premiums have increased fourfold, and several carriers have suspended service pending clarification of airspace control. University students have vacated dormitories, returning to provincial hometowns where parents wait with unasked questions. Hospital emergency departments have quietly reviewed mass casualty protocols. Funeral parlors have discreetly increased supplies of embalming fluid. In the presidential compound, lights continue burning through the early morning hours. The flag continues flying. The man inside continues writing, rewriting, awaiting an address he will never perfect, a departure he will never voluntarily make, an ending he can no longer control.